going to introduce our next panel. So our next session is called Intersectionality and Cultural Responsiveness, Recognizing and Valuing Multiple Identities. So if we could please welcome Dr. Javiera Khadija Shah, Founding Director and Learning and Development Inclusion Lead, member of the Principal's Office, Social Performance Network, and Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. So welcome, Dr. Javiera. Dr. Javiera will be our moderator. And our panelists, John Shortring, founder and CEO of Support Edu, who we have already heard from today, who'll be gracing us with his presence again, and Kiran Pasha, Director and CEO, Evolution Preschools and Nurseries. Come on up, Kiran. And Mahima Garg, CEO, Certometer. Come on down. Let's give them all a round of applause. And if you want to take your microphones there, panel. And over to you, Dr. Javiera. Of course, we have one very important person who I did forget to introduce. And this is Nell Puter, CEO and founder of Calm Confidence Academy. Let's give her a round of applause. Welcome, Nell. There's a seat right there for you.
Hello, I'm just checking this is working, and it is. Wonderful. Hi, so I'm Dr. Javeria Khadija Shah. I'm just going to give you a little sense of how the panel is planned, and then we'll move on to the actual discussion. We're hoping there'll be opportunities for you to also participate and ask questions, maybe share some of your own examples around intersectionality and cultural responsiveness. To begin with, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start us off with our introductions. I'll introduce myself, and then I'll move on to my colleagues here. I'll then frame the panel today, because obviously intersectionality and cultural responsiveness as terms are quite broad, and they might mean different things in different contexts. And obviously I'll invite my colleagues as well to participate and give us their own definitions if they feel it's slightly different to what I've framed. I'm then going to move us into a discussion around examples of cultural responsiveness. And then I'll summarize, and we'll move on to Q&A. Why am I telling you all of this? You can probably tell I've been a teacher for quite some time, and I always find it helps to know what the layout is. So that's what's prepared. So I'm going to start off by introducing myself. I've been teaching for over 20 years. I started off as a creative arts educator. I started off teaching in the UK further education sector. So we were looking at sort of 16 to 19, and that later changed to 14 plus after some new Labour policy making around changing the age of compulsory participation. I then moved into higher education about 10, 11 years ago. I have been involved in teacher education alongside creative arts, but now I'm a cultural sociologist specializing in policy and practice, and looking at how we perform our socialized identities in society. So looking at that as a concept of social theatre. My day job, so to speak, is Associate Director of the Centre for Inclusive Pedagogy and Practice, as well as being a member of the Principal's Office at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, which is part of the University of London Federation. So the previous panel did resonate a great deal around discussions around creativity and so on. I'm also a founding director of the Social Performance Network, which I founded in 2018, and we officially launched at the Tate Exchange London in 2019. And that's sort of taking that research and that work that I've talked about, looking at socialization a little bit further. I'm also an anti-racist trainer, and I've worked with over 30 clients, including Advanced HE, Durham University, University of Edinburgh, and so on. So that's me in a nutshell. I think I've done that in less than a minute, actually, which will be a first time for me. So I'm going to move on in turn. So Kiran, if you want to start off by introducing yourself, please. It's a slide.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Javeria. I don't know about all of you, but I do find it difficult when somebody says to me, introduce yourself, or what do you do? Because I think, where do I start from? So I'm just going to try and summarize my journey as much as possible in a minute. So I started off by working as a teaching assistant in a nursery school in Pakistan when I was very, very young. Then I moved on to teach a bit of maths to secondary. I used to be good at maths, but now not anymore. Calculator is my best friend. And then we decided that we'd move to England, where, again, I started off by teaching in a preschool nursery. Then my children were too young, so I started off childminding, which is you work from home with young children. I think I did that for about 2 years, and because my own children were very young, I just felt that I was around little ones 24 hours a day, and my family started telling me that, you know, when the children aren't around you, your voice is very, very high, so tone down. But those kind of things I got used to. That's when I decided that I'm going to go back and study, and I went into adult teaching. So I started teaching FE and HE in England. So I worked in colleges and universities, mainly teaching early years qualifications, the cash level 2 and level 3 in childcare, foundation degree, and the degree. And then I was like, okay, don't want to work for other people. I've had enough. I did that for about 10 years. It's done some assessing and IQA. And I thought, you know what, I'm qualified and experienced in early years, so I'm going to set up my own preschool nursery, which I did in London. So I have 2 preschool nurseries now in London. Very, very good experience, I must say. But again, when I opened it, after a couple of years, I realized that it's very difficult to find quality staff. So I knew what I wanted to do with those children. I knew how to give them quality education and childcare and how to engage families. But I couldn't do that. In one of the nurseries, there was 35 children. It's not possible that I could work with each one of them. And then especially when I opened the second nursery, obviously impossible. I'm not going to be in 2 places at one time. And I struggled with staffing. So I thought, okay, what can I do? And I thought, I've been teaching in schools and universities and colleges, people who want to work with children. I've been training them. So let's do that. Let's train my own staff. And that's when I started doing training and learning and development. So I try and get people who want to work with children or who just have a passion, and I train them. So that's in a nutshell. So I have 2 preschool nurseries, and I do a lot of learning and development. I work in the UAE with some nurseries as well, and colleges, as well in Pakistan and London. Thank you.
No, that's still not working. Just talk. Okay. Just talk. Okay. So I'm going to pass it to you, Mahima. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kiran and Javeria. I think it is very inspiring to hear your stories. I have been listening you guys, and I'm feeling inspired. Okay, so coming to my journey, I am Mahima, founder of Certometer. So if you have realized, we can scroll social media, Facebook, Netflix for hours and hours. The moment we shift to learning, we feel bored, every one of us. Why to blame kids? We are also like that. The moment say you have to learn this, oh, we are very quick in finding something else very interesting. And over the period, we realize that it's not only for children, it's for us. The cause of this is technology and should be solved with the technology. So I think we are distracted by technology and we are together with technology. So over the 2 decades of my entrepreneurship journey, we have been solving the problem of educators, student, and we are trying to build an interesting learning. So we have developed a platform where, student or any learner can come and stay there, stay engaged. If learner can smile in between the learning, I think he will stay. We want to teach more, but our concept is be there, be engaged there, and if you can smile in between, if you can, enjoy the concept, you will learn it. So we actually have a very good platform, very interesting platform, and very appealing videos and content through which people learn technology. So any technology you talk about, latest we are talking AI, cloud, machine learning, anything you do, we help people to, adopt technology and stay ahead in their career. So our concept is developing a personalized learning. Since we are talking this concept of, culture and everything, then how do we expect everyone to learn in the same way? We are talking across boundaries, but within the class, everyone learns differently. I can't solve this, one-on-one through assessment. It has to be solved through technology. So same question paper, if I give it to 10 people, definitely the score would be, different for everyone. But how about I assess people based on their skill, and I assess individual person based on their strength. Topic could be the same, but it is a sequential learning. If you have understood ABC, then I'll go to the next level. So it is not all for all. Thank you.
It will kick in. It's kicking. It's kicking in. I'm not going to rap for you. It will be very old school rap. Okay, so is it fair to say that, your own journey is very inspirational. You said 2 decades of entrepreneurship, and you're clearly very passionate about bespoke models of learning and teaching. So do you think that's fair to summarize in a nutshell that you are an entrepreneur, 2 decades experience in trying to create creative sort of technical solutions to engage engage learners? Yeah? Oh gosh, that's impressive. Thank you, Mahima. Much appreciated. Thank you. Over to you, Nell. A little bit about yourself, please. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's kicking in. My name is Nell Putter. I'm founder of Confidence Academy, where we teach leaders and teams develop psychological capital. And something Mohita said, smile in between. I love that. And psychological capital, what is it? We do this through confidence mindset system and also positive leadership. And I love the idea of Kiran saying, okay, there were no teachers, and then I started teaching. It's like a perfect example of positive leaders saying, hey, there is something missing, but I can do it. And that's also confidence. It's also kind of self-trust. And this is what we teach leaders, bringing this positive psychology into the world, into the business, but also into education. And I have later on examples how we do that in the education sector.
Fantastic. That's really great. Thank you so much. John?
Hello, everyone. I'm back again. If the microphone, there we go. I won't explain myself again in terms of my profile. For those of you who missed me earlier, I run my own business. It's called Supported You. We'll talk more about that. My interest in this area is very much to do with leadership and cultural intelligence within leadership, which I will explore as we go through the conversation. So I will leave it there, and I hope to see as many of you later over lunch.
Lovely, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to frame the panel as I promised. So, gosh, intersectionality and cultural responsiveness, 2 very broad terms that could be understood in lots of different ways. The way I'm going to frame them today is if we look at intersectionality through the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, who is the founding thinker behind this concept and this idea of us consolidating lots of different embodied experience, a race being at the forefront of that. If you're not familiar with Crenshaw's work, she's a Black legal scholar, and she sort of founded this term on this idea of the Black experience in addition to embodying other aspects to that identity. So now obviously it's used in lots of different contexts. We could be embodying a range of different intersectional, nuanced identities. We could, for instance, be embodying race and neurodivergence, or gender and age. So there's lots of different ways to understand it, but essentially it's looking at the sort of holistic identities and how they frame in and how they carried and how they can inform experience and interaction and engagement. Cultural responsiveness then, therefore, is even more prevalent in the context of a globalized society. With technology, Mahima, your area, with technology, and then also this idea of if we're looking at it through the lens of, say, let's take higher education. I'll talk in a UK context, we're often trying to recruit international students. There's an expectation, obviously, that the spaces that we're holding for those students will be welcoming, will provide a sense of belonging, and will celebrate those different aspects to their identity. So when we're thinking of cultural responsiveness, the way I'd like to define it in today's discussion is thinking of it as a preemptive step that we're taking in order to assist a sense of belonging for everybody within our communities and our societies. Would anybody like to add anything different to what I've just shared in terms of definitional contexts?
Well, I could, just one word you
Sure.
said, belonging.
Yeah.
And from the perspective of psychology, positive psychology, it's actually psychological safety, and anyone, any creature, human being or any other creature in this earth, we need the psychological safety to feel safe, and then we can develop, and then we can explore and create something different. So that's absolutely the basic need of any creature. And when we have this from the foundation, then we could talk about achievement and goals and different things like that.
Well, that's fascinating, and I'm looking really forward to hearing your response to the questions, the question later, because absolutely, psychological safety it's a crucial kind of building block, really, isn't it? And I don't know whether you'd agree, Nell, but it sort of makes me think of how it sort of connects with ideas and concepts of trust as well, trust and vulnerability and the risking of trust, and feeling safe to be vulnerable in spaces, feeling safe to share in spaces, knowing that that would be accepted. So, I mean, there's so much there already. The cogs are turning. So I'm looking forward to asking you the question later. Thank you so much for that. I'm hoping that we will have time to ask you as well towards the end if there's anything that you would like to add in terms of your own understandings of definitions or your work or your examples. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of context of how I work with these concepts, and I'm going to move on and get more detailed examples from the panelists, is for me it's about embedding inclusion. So fostering cultures of inclusion and embedding that throughout not just organizations, but looking at it more holistically. So it's how we present in different spaces. So it's not just about the 9 to 5, so to speak. It's also about how we're interacting beyond that. We've already sort of touched upon this idea of sense of belonging, and we can always come back and revisit that. But again, I think that is really important. If you feel a sense of belonging, you're more likely to invest emotionally, intellectually in a space. And obviously, a lot of our interactions in institutional spaces and also socially can be transactional, and that doesn't have to be relating to the obvious kind of economic side. It could be relating to sort of cultural capital as much as anything. But I think for me, particularly in the line of work that I do, because I've been driving inclusion at the Royal Central for nearly coming up to 10 years now, it's this idea of recognizing identity and looking at identity as holistic, trying to recognize the whole of the person as much as possible, and recognizing the nuances and recognizing how that then frames into a range of other external factors, such as power dynamics, lived experience, different contexts, different interactions. So I think the two key terms that I would love for us to sort of keep coming back to today, if we can, is this idea of holistic approach and globalization. I would love to see what your views are on that as well, sort of implicitly as we're going through this. So now I'm going to go into my first and my only question. So yeah, this is a panel with a bit of a difference in this regard. I'd like you to provide professional examples of good practice demonstrating cultural responsiveness, please. So, Kieran, you're off the hook for now because we did the intros this way, and I don't want to keep picking on you. So I'm going to start with John, and then if we can move this way. Lovely.
Thanks very much. So I'm going to take this question from the perspective of leadership within schools. And as you heard from me this morning, I love the phrase trust, and I'm actually going to use the word holistic in a second, so that links really well. But my experience of cultural diversity comes really from cultural intelligence within leadership, and particularly how can leaders act in a culturally intelligent manner when they're leading culturally diverse teams. So a little bit of theory to start with. So there's a couple of thinkers that I've really explored and really enjoyed getting to know. So Early and Musikowski talk about cultural intelligence as a term. You might have heard of Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence. They see it in the same realm as something called CQ. And they talk about how you adapt to new cultural circumstances when you enter them. So they talk about the cognitive, the behavioural and the emotional. And are you able to adapt in certain ways when you go into that? And I'd really urge you, if you're interested in this, to go and have a look at their work. And then the second book, which I bought, which was absolutely amazing, and it's used a lot in business, but I actually walked into a school in Dubai 2 months ago, and the deputy head I was speaking to had it on her bookshelf. And it's by Erin Meyer, and it's called The Culture Map. And she talks about 8 different ways in which leaders can respond to culturally diverse teams. And so what I've tried to do, and that's what I'm going to talk about now, and I'm very happy to kind of receive questions on this or talk about the work either now or later, is there are 3 ways in which leaders can respond to cultural intelligence and cultural diversity within the workplace, and how they can, in essence, can transcend cultural barriers and basically bring that team together. So the first way that people can act is relationship builders. We talk about trust there, really important. So a lot of relationships, and in the research that I've done, relationships can work 2 ways. They can either be built via trust, and that trust comes from personal relationships, so by getting to know someone, knowing about their family, or it can become through task, so how good are you at your task? And traditionally, the latter of those is in essence in the Middle East, is in Africa, and is in the Far East, in China. But what I found in my research was actually 99% of teachers and leaders I spoke to want those relationships. They want people to know about people's families, that they feel welcome, that they have that psychological safety. So for me, that's the first one, is really to do with building relationships within your team. And that will, in essence, bridge the cultural divide. The second one, which I thought was really interesting, is about communication. So culturally intelligent leaders are excellent communicators. Now, I'll give you an example of this one, and I think this actually works in any sphere, in any range of education, is to do with the concept of a pre-meeting. Now, a lot of different cultures are not comfortable with giving feedback openly, cannot take criticism openly, and they also won't voice their opinion in front of a leader. So if I'm sitting in a meeting, some cultures will not challenge my view on it. And what we found in our research was that actually by having pre-meetings with people, with individual meetings, is a really successful way of breaking down that cultural divide. But it also shows people that you're listening to them, and it also shows that you value their opinion. And then the second part of this is actually by putting yourself not in the meeting. So your communication is actually by not being present, because then it enables everyone else in your team to have an open dialogue and discourse about the challenge or the communication or what is happening. So there are two different aspects on that. The final one to do with communication is that different cultures work in different ways. So in the Western culture, I found this really interesting when I came to Dubai, is that at the end of each meeting, I would send kind of a summary of the meeting and some action points. And I was really surprised when I didn't get anything back from people. But that's because that's not how it works sometimes in the Middle East. But the way around that is to establish, well, how are your meetings going to work? Have that conversation with your team. How do we think, are we going to have those action points? Are we going to have those pre-meetings? So everyone knows what is happening. And then the final one is holistic thinking. Now, amazing culturally intelligent leaders are holistic thinkers. So depending on where you sit in terms of the culture map, you're going to approach presentations or problem solvings in a different way. You're going to either want to know the why something is going to work, you're going to want to know how it's going to work, or what is it going to solve. And holistic thinkers take that on board and actually present all three of them in a presentation. You don't just lead with why something is going to happen without the detail. You're not just going to tell someone how something is going to happen without explaining to them why. So that's the first thing. But the second thing about holistic thinking is bringing your team together under a common purpose and having a vision. And culturally intelligent leaders will do that. They will bring everyone together and they will drive that agenda forward. Whilst also, and this is my final point, bearing in mind the local context. Because a holistic thinker cannot be a holistic thinker, a holistic leader in education, a holistic head of department, without understanding the context, the government, the exam board, whatever it is, as to where they're operating. So, 3 things from me in terms of practical examples, and I can go into them depending on where our conversation goes. But if you want to be a culturally intelligent leader in a school, you need to build relationships with people. You need to be an excellent communicator in all sense of purposes, whether it's written, verbal, or in meetings. And you need to be a holistic thinker with a clear purpose and vision, bearing in mind your local context. And all 3 of those things will transcend, according to the research that I have done, whatever makeup of culture is in your team.
Fantastic responses. Thank you so much, John. I'll come back and summarize properly, but straight away I'm thinking macro and micro. So yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Right, over to you now. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, John, for setting up the setting for the next thing I would like to add to your cultural intelligence. From my perspective, there is a term, universal intelligence. And obviously, most of the people I met here, and like in my daily life, they're already emotionally intelligent. So people already know that. And cultural intelligence is absolutely important. But if I take you even a little level higher, universal intelligence, like saying it's something holistic as well, like, okay, there is a meaning to all of it end of the day on a universal level. I know it's a bit high, but obviously it's micro level, as you say. Of course, the question is, okay, how do I make it? There will be a micro level. But how do we have this universal intelligence saying, okay, there in this room, I don't know how many cultures, how many nationalities, I don't know, 100 or 200, I don't know. Doesn't really matter, but there is still a purpose, there is universal intelligence here. And when we are open and curious towards each other, towards, okay, in the Middle East, this is how you do it. In India, this is how you do it. That's amazing. And like already having this mindset of, okay, what you're bringing in will add on to this universal development of something maybe not for me, but for the generations to come. And I know it's a little bit high what I'm talking. I mean, you need to also find ways to implement it in a practice, but just really prompting some thoughts in here.
Interesting. I'll be really curious to explore that later on when we're thinking about it through the lens of the types of, I guess, stakeholders that we're trying to attract and the cultures that they belong to. Does that affect the literacy around this idea of what you're saying, universal intelligence? I'd be really curious to know how we can sort of navigate that around the specific cultural practices that we're trying to engage and learn about through the cultural literacy, and then like a universal literacy. Yeah, lots of food for thought there. Thank you so much, Nell. Thank you.
I forgot to mention an example. Maybe later on, if I have time, I'll also give an
example.
Oh,
no, I think we have got time, actually. We're doing very well for time. Yeah, okay. I'm going to pat myself now. I don't want to do it too soon, though. Yeah, okay. Go on now.
Without really going here and saying, okay, I'm talking theory here, because positive leadership, obviously, we can implement it. And there's something measurable, there is something teachable, so it's not just a really happy land and smiling, because positive thinking is good, but obviously in the world there are challenges, there are also many different issues, so we don't say everything is just happy land, we just say, okay, things happen, challenges happen, issues are there, different cultures are there. There is some conflicts, external, but a lot of also internal conflict. I mean, in one person, so just imagine how many people when they are outside. So one example of positive leadership I implemented at Technical University at Hamburg. I come from Germany, Hamburg. So there were different engineers, learning students at the faculty, and because at the moment in Germany we have different flows of different nationalities, so there are kind of groups of some nationalities wouldn't cooperate on some project with some others. So they asked me to implement positive leadership among the students. And there are some pillars of positive leadership, which I don't want to talk about in details now on the stage, but maybe later on. And yeah, we could measure the positivity of a person before intervention, then we do this in a group or in one-to-one as well, and then we could measure it afterwards. And as a result, the students, they would be more cooperative with each other, because positive attitude creates pro-social behavior where people like to work with each other and do good things for each other and for others as well. So that's, for example, one example from real life.
That's fascinating. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the intervention? What was the intervention? The intervention you mentioned?
Say that again, please.
The intervention that you mentioned.
The nations?
Oh, I thought you said there was an intervention. There was
intervention.
A group. Yes.
Intervention. So sorry, because the acoustic is here a little bit. Yeah. So it's
I mean, this is my Surrey accent. When I do my actual Cockney accent,
okay.
You'll be in real trouble. So
well, that's about communication, right? Like, okay, what did you say? What do you mean? Yeah, it's like asking one more question. The intervention comes from the positive psychology, and basically it's talking about, I don't want to really go deep in there, but talk about identities. And in psychology, there is something called multiple identities. Like everyone, like me, I would have 200 multiple identities. So like, okay, when I'm in particular conflict, it's not me who is in conflict, but it's a part of me who feels afraid. It's part of me who doesn't understand. So going a little bit in there and looking at this fear behind it. What is the fear? Why am I not open to other cultures? It's because usually a person has some fear of something, you know, and like not looking away from that, but looking inside and embracing, accepting, and then healing that fear, because it comes from somewhere.
that's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. I'm going to unpack that a little bit more later, but that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So that's a psychological perspective. So far we've got micro, macro, looking at global leadership. We've looked at this concept of intervention, psychological interventions to try and create more synergies and acceptance and understandings, foster inclusion essentially through cultural responsiveness. Mahima, it's your turn.
Okay.
Examples, please.
I think it's a very interesting topic, and Indians can relate it very well. You know, we are talking about diversity, multiple identity, culture. Who can understand better than Indians? You cross every 100 kilometer, you know, the food would change, the culture would change, the dress up would change. Can you imagine how many different languages we speak in India? Any guesses, any wild guesses?
37?
It is 780 different languages.
Wow.
Can you imagine, you know, so many languages.
I was close.
And every state, every village you go, you dress up differently, you talk differently, you eat different food. But when we work together, you know, we operate from Bangalore. So it's a place where all the people come for IT, and, you know, we all call ourselves as a knowledge workforce. So when we come together, so everyone come from a different place, and that's where we have to mingle with everyone and, you know, look at the common goal. We have to achieve something common. We have to inspire everyone, even though they are coming from different, you know, place with different culture. Can you believe in all 365 days, we have some and other festivals. All 365 days we have festival. Some another team member is always celebrating something. So what we have learned, we have already learned the culture respecting each other, because that's where, it is helping us everywhere. So I would relate how this is helping us in building the technology. Even though we are from a different culture, but for entertainment, more or less we use common stuff. People use Insta, Facebook, Netflix. How come we are common, right? We are liking everything. So one may like one dish, another may like another, but food is a common thing. So if you look at technology, all of us are using, cloud. We are using technology to bring at the same pace. So I got a chance to work with many international clients as well, where the learning approach was way different, and that helped us. So I'll give you an example. Say, if we all tend to answer quickly in the class, if you are being asked any question. Say, if teacher is asking, what is this? Everybody would try to answer first. So answering first is being taught to us. So this means if you're answering first, if you're raising your hand first, you are the smart guy, right? And that is being taught to us. Which means if I'm taking any interview of any technical person, if I'm giving a problem to solve, and if he starts solving the problem, for me, he's just doing how to do it. He's not asking me how I have reached to that problem. Is this the real problem? Or there is some main problem, and this is the consequence of the problem. So am I jumping on the how, or I am thinking on the why and what? So that's the way of learning we are trying to build through technology, where people, you have any problem, go to ChatGPT, ask. But why we have reached to this problem?
So would it be fair to say that the national context of India and its versatile different cultures and multiple languages help implicitly inform your digital technological practice in reaching a wide range of contexts, but you're always thinking about a broader context there, rather than thinking of it just at surface value? And that's partly informed by national identity.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Absolutely, very
right.
well.
I'm expecting a ticket to India now, because Mahima has sold it to me, right? I want to go and visit India. It sounds incredible. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mahima. Much appreciated. Right, Kiran, over to you.
Thank you. I think because I work with children from the age of 18 months and adults, I am probably going to focus on early years. I know a lot of you, I think all of you have worked with adults, but not many of you have worked with early years. And listening to some of the panel discussions yesterday and talking to people outside, I think we will all agree that it starts from that age, because their minds are absorbent like sponges. So I'm actually going to keep it very simple and very practical by giving you an example of a child. So this child is going to be an imaginary child, and we're going to look at how the child may have multiple identities, what Nell also talked about, and how the adults working with them need to be culturally responsive. So let's assume that there is a child, let's say a 3-year-old boy, in a nursery setting in London. And he has recently come from, let's say, Poland. So his first language is Polish. He's a 3-year-old boy who comes into a densely populated area, and he starts nursery. What is the first thing will come to your mind as his need? It's language, right? It's an English-speaking country, English-speaking nursery, and the child does not have any English, no understanding of English. So obviously that is one of his needs, which is very obvious. So it's easy to address that. What do? We ask the parents maybe to tell us a few words in Polish. I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, toilet. Maybe provide books in the child's first language. There is that belonging that we've talked about. But that's not the only thing. We have to dive deeper into the context. We have to look at perhaps the socioeconomic background, their financial conditions. Is the child coming to nursery well fed or hungry, not going to be able to focus? Obviously, if it's a densely populated area of London, and those of you who are from the UK, they're mainly flats there, apartments. Does the child have access to outdoor play area? You know, some of the things that we actually don't think about. When we talk about cultural responsiveness, we often talk about discrimination only, but it does include children of families or adults who are probably more privileged than others. There's loads of things when we're looking at this child. Again, some of the things that may not be very common in countries like UAE or Pakistan or other Islamic countries, because I've worked in those countries, but because we're looking at a global issue or globalization, I'm talking about an example from London. The child may come from a family background where the parents are from the same sex, for example, and you are celebrating Mother's Day. The child has 2 dads. What do you do? So those kind of things we really need to look at, because that is the child's identity. That's what defines them. And for us as adults or the staff working with those children, there is a limit. We cannot know about every single culture and every single religion, but training, staff development is what comes in at this point, is that you need to make sure that your staff understand that the children or the families may have a lot of different needs, and how to cater for those needs.
That's really, really interesting. I'm just curious, because obviously, and I will summarize very shortly and pass it over to yourselves very shortly as well, but I'm just curious, you've mentioned professional developments. I'm just interested, are there particular, I mean, how does that work? Like, how would you go out there and canvass the appropriate professional development providers to see that they are able to deliver the type of training that your staff need?
So that was a part of my introduction, if you remember, that the reason why I started with the training company is that at least I know that my staff are ready and they understand the needs of the society, basically. So I do it myself, I train them.
Okay.
But even when I used to teach at colleges and nursery and universities, there's always something about cultural responsiveness, discrimination, so they do get the basic knowledge. We are lucky in the UK that a lot of workforce comes from a lot of different cultures and backgrounds.
Absolutely.
So they are actually aware of certain needs.
Absolutely.
But obviously in some countries it may not be the case, and then that's when the staff development comes in.
That's wonderful. So if you need prof development training, Kiran's your person, okay, everybody?
Yeah, look for me.
I hope you have business cards, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so a couple of things here just to touch upon, which is really important. I think first of all, recognizing that if you are working with diverse cultural contexts, people coming in from diverse cultural contexts, we can't assume a binary. We can't assume that because someone's coming in from a cultural context that they're naturally going to be completely balanced potentially in their approach. So an example that I can give is if we take the UKHE landscape, we're often actively trying to recruit international students into that landscape, but we can't assume that that's always going to work out as we're, quite, utopianly intending. So, for example, there are issues around. There could be the rise of fascism in certain countries, and we've recruited students from those places. There could be anti-blackness in certain communities. Right? We've just got to, so I think that's an important point in that we have to look at it from a balanced perspective. We can't always assume a binary, as in people are always coming in and they're coming in at a weaker back foot or a lesser back foot. Like it's all about sort of working together. I want to triangulate everything that we've discussed in a way through a really positive example. So this will hopefully touch upon, John, your points around global leadership and cultural literacy. They'll hopefully your point around universal literacy, psychological safety, and creating and fostering environments of inclusion. Mahima? a celebration of how macro nationalistic contexts can inform like the micro. So again, kind of synergistically with John. And then Kieran, obviously you gave some really fantastic London examples, and my example is going to be a London example. So I would define myself as a post-colonial Londoner. My father migrated to the UK in 1965 as a 21-year-old law graduate. I am an example of someone who was coming from different cultural contexts and heritages, but in a British context, as in born and bred in Britain. And was a really positive example for me was growing up in a very diverse London borough, in East London. Our primary school had a range of different representations there, mostly from within the Pakistani and Jamaican communities, but you had a real kind of mixture of different heritages, and obviously, and then in the 90s, you saw like an influx of Somali immigration occur as well. And one really positive memory that I have around, I think, which speaks to the leadership of that primary school that I went to, speaks to this idea of psychological safety, speaks to the idea of understanding the national contexts, to the demographics that are in front of you, and speaks to London, was this idea of our religious education, and that primary school factored in Rastafarianism as a religion that we were learning. And that really opened my eyes up from quite a young age around the different contexts, and that's something that I will always look back on fondly, and it was a really good takeaway. So I'm now going to pass it over to yourselves. Anyone here want to share examples from their own practice or talk about how they would define cultural responsiveness or intersectionality in action? It may not be the education context, it may be another context. Or anyone would have any questions? Yes?
Hello there. All the dignitaries present here. I am Kalyan from India. So what do you think if government organization alliance with each other by sending their students international student exchange program from an infant stage to different countries, and like not infant, I can say at the age of 15 or 16 by student exchange program, and would that make a possibility to understand the valuing of multiple identities and recognizing different cultures?
It's a really interesting question. Who would like to take that question from the panel?
Yeah, I think it is very interesting question, and I can relate to it. Earlier, this concept was not there in India. If you look at right now, there are a lot of universities are, they're developing the campuses where they're doing the student exchange program. And based on my knowledge, whoever I met so far and whoever we have trained, it has always been a positive impact. And I would really suggest why we are crossing the boundaries always. Why don't we have within different states doing so? And why don't we make this as a mandatory practice, for all the colleges, schools, and exchanging their ideas and thoughts. So this is being implemented very well. It is happening different, in countries. And I would definitely, if government can intervene and do it within different state, it would really create a positive impact when they will reach to their professional journey.
I actually think 15 is too old. In the school that I used to work in, we had a number of different international schools around the world, in China, Thailand, Monaco, and it was part of students who were 11 and 12. They would do exchange programs in those countries. So I actually think 15 and 16 is too old. I think it should be younger, in that kind of lower secondary, because that's the time when they're developing. It also, with another hat on as an examiner, as a senior examiner, you do it at 11, 12 and 13, there is less pressure on them at that stage as well. So it means that they're actually going to get that better global exposure at a younger age before then, and I know we had this conversation earlier about exam boards, etc., before they have to face those exams.
Lovely, thank you so much. Thank you for your question, that was a great question. I'm so sorry. I've got this big red sign going, time's up. Sorry, I'm giving you behind the scenes away. You can catch us at a little later. We're happy to talk. Am I right? Sorry, I've spoken for us there. Thank you so much for your time and engagement today. Thank you.
Thank you.